The Nike Pegasus Premium, the first output of the brand's innovation supercycle and a true reimagining of what it is to run on air. Is this the shoe that's going to save Nike? No, but I also don't think Nike needs saving. Nike's going to be just fine, and they're going to find their way out of their current predicament, and there's already a lot of positives happening right now. Second thing, is this shoe going to change running shoes? Well, yes and no. I think for Nike, this is a hugely important shoe, and there's some innovation in this shoe, which we'll talk about in this review, that are going to be hugely impactful for the entire Nike running line for the next 3-4 years, probably, maybe longer than that. For running shoes in general, the impact may be a little bit different, but I do think there's some technologies, approaches, and innovations in this shoe that are going to be uniquely Nike, and there will be some catch-up from other brands at some point. And that's where this one gets quite interesting. Starting with the specs of the shoe, we have a lot going on in this shoe. There's a lot of lines, there's a lot of materials, there's a lot of tech, there's a lot of innovation. There's just a lot of everything in the shoe. We have 45 mil of midsole in the heel, 35 mil of midsole in the forefoot, giving you a 10 mil drop. The real feel of this drop is 8 to 10. I would say probably closer to a true 10. This is a Pegasus. It has that forward, up on your toes feel that is very quintessential to a peg. This shoe weighs 311 grams or 10.97 ounces in the US men's size 9 reference size, which happens to be my size. And as you can see, my pair are a little bit under that. Yes, this is a heavy shoe, but we'll get to that in the ride. And from a ride profile, the only way I can describe this shoe is boing boing. Bouncy doesn't do this shoe justice. It's boing boing. It's whatever comes after bouncy. And this shoe has all of that because of the geometry, the materials, the midsole, just everything in this shoe. Starting with the upper on this shoe, let's talk about the aesthetics first. As I've already pointed out, there is a lot going on in the shoe. And what I find really fascinating aesthetically about this shoe is there's references to a bunch of previous Nike models. I see 4 in particular. I see a lot of Air Max 97, which is a very iconic Nike silhouette. I see a lot of that DNA here. I see quite a bit Peg 34 in the overall silhouette of this shoe, and that is one of the more important pegs in recent history. I see quite a bit of Vaporfly 3 DNA here, particularly in the upper, but also in some of the lines of the midsole. And obviously, I think we need to talk about the Zoom All Out, which is the other full-length, or at least 3/4 length Air Zoom unit shoe that I think a lot of people will be comparing this shoe to. And we'll get to that in the ride section of this video. But overall, I do think this is a shoe that every time you look at it, you're going to find something new. You're going to find some reference to a previous Nike model or something that you like or maybe don't like, but there is a lot going on in the shoe. But from a running standpoint, we have a circular knit upper, meaning there is a nicely compliant material that wraps around the foot. It reminds me very much of the upper material that's on the Vaporfly 3. It isn't the same material, but it fits on the foot very well. But it is contained by this secondary material, which you see running around the bottom of the upper. That's almost like a bathtub. That's a almost kind of vaporweave-esque material. It's a much tighter mesh. It's not vaporweave, but that contains the upper, that contains a lot of the structure for the foot, because overall, this is a very tall shoe, 45-35, and it is a fairly narrow platform, so you do feel like you're up. So the upper does a really good job of containing the foot in a very nice way, in a very much training fit way, but in a performance training fit. I think overall the fit of this shoe is great. It is a Pegasus. It fits like a Pegasus. It's got the Pegasus Achilles flare. It's got the Pegasus ankle collar. It's got a Pegasus tongue. There's not too much padding, but there's not too little padding. Overall, this is very much a Pegasus, and it fits your foot like a Pegasus. And that's one of the best things I could possibly say about any shoe. Moving to sizing and fit of this shoe, I went true to size, US men's size 9 for this shoe, as I do in any Pegasus. And I'm going to say that that is the right fit for me. Now, I guess I like a tighter fit. I like it more confining on the foot, and I like less room in front of my toe. I don't like a full thumb's width. I like maybe a pinky's width between the tip of my toe and the front of the shoe. So if you like more room or a looser training fit in your trainers, you could theoretically go up half a size in this shoe, but my recommendation would be true to size in this shoe. However, this shoe does feel a bit narrow. If I compare it to a Peg 41, you can see that this shoe does read a little bit more narrow. I actually think they're the same last, but I do think because of the construction of this upper, and particularly this secondary mesh material around the bottom of the upper, it just pulls the upper material in and up, so it's not as generous in width. Now, I'm going to say that I do not think this is a wide shoe. If you have a wide foot, because of that containment at the bottom of the upper, I don't think this is going to work for you. Additionally, as I've already pointed out, this is a very narrow platform. So even if you can get your foot in here, it's going to be spilling over the platform, which is going to make this shoe feel much more unstable than it really needs to be. So unfortunately, I don't think this is a wide-footed runner's shoe. I don't think there'll be a wide version of this shoe. But if you have a normal volume foot, even a narrow volume foot, and you know how a Pegasus fits, you're going to like how this shoe fits true to size. Moving to the midsole of this shoe, there's a lot of materials in this shoe. This upper piece of foam that you see directly under the foot, that is ZoomX foam. Below that is the full-length Air Zoom unit, and below that, only in the heel, only this little wedge right here, that is ReactX foam, and then we have an outsole. So if you're a forefoot striker, you're essentially running on ZoomX in Air Zoom and the outsole. There's no ReactX in the forefoot experience of this shoe. You're only getting ReactX if you're heel striking. I would say when I'm midfoot striking in the shoe, I'm also not getting that. I'm just feeling ZoomX and Air Zoom in the feel of the midsole of the shoe. It's quite an interesting feel, and there's a big surprise here. And that surprise is this Air Zoom unit is fairly stiff. It's very structural, actually. I think when you first pick this shoe up and you do the bend test, you're going to be shocked just how stiff this shoe is. You're going to think there's a plate in this shoe. There isn't a plate in this shoe, but this is a stiffer shoe than you would actually think it would be. And that makes quite a difference in the ride of this shoe in a very, very good way. Again, I'll get to that in the ride section of this shoe. And moving to the outsole of this shoe, we have a classic Nike waffle outsole pattern in the forefoot with two patches of material in the heel that also have that waffle outsole pattern. The exposed foam that you see here is actually ReactX foam, so it's more high wearing than ZoomX foam actually is, and it's actually treaded just a tiny bit. And overall, what I'm going to say is the material that's in the forefoot of this shoe is a stiffer, more rigid outsole material than I think I've ever experienced on any Nike shoe that I can remember really ever. It is there, I think, for some structural reason to maybe support the Air Zoom unit a little bit more, but it's actually quite interesting how stiff and how rigid this material is. It has really nice feel, it has really good grip, and it seems to be very high wearing. This is after about 55 miles, and this is my highest wear point in any running shoe because on my right foot I scuff or twist it a little bit. And I'm actually quite happy with that amount of wear. I actually think this is going to be quite high wearing, and it's actually quite thick, so this should wear quite well. As far as grip and feel on wet or dry surfaces, absolutely no problem. I run this shoe in the rain, I run this shoe wet to dry, and in a lot of dry, cold pavement, and I've had absolutely no problems with grip anywhere with this shoe. Let's talk about the ride of the Nike Pegasus Premium, but before we get there, we need to step back a little bit and talk about the engineering and the innovation in the midsole. And to do that, we need to start with this shoe, the Nike Vaporfly. This is a Vaporfly 3, but it's really any generation of Vaporfly. Now, there's a very important thing about this shoe that I've talked a lot about on this channel, but I think it's still something that sets this shoe apart from really any other super shoe on the market. And it's that there is a very compressive and resilient foam, a lot of energy return in ZoomX foam, but there's also a carbon fiber plate in this shoe that is actually more flexible than a lot of other super shoes. This is still a very stiff carbon fiber plated shoe, but the magic of the Vaporfly is the combination of the resilience and the squish of ZoomX and how that interacts with the flex that's engineered into the Nike fly plate that's in this shoe, how those two things work together. It's not one or the other, they have to work together. And I think that's one of the things that sets the Vaporfly apart from really any other shoe. But that DNA is where the team started with the Nike Pegasus Premium. Additionally, we need to talk about this shoe, the Nike Zoom All Out, from almost 10 years ago now. This was Nike's last attempt at a full-length Air Zoom unit, though as you can see from this photo, it actually wasn't a full-length unit. It was only a 3/4 length unit. The material that was in front of the ball, the foot, under the toes, was foam. And you can really see that when we put them side by side. Now, the Zoom All Out was a shoe that was fun to kind of wear, but it was kind of all over the place, very unstable, and, not a shoe that I think a lot of people really love to actually run in. And a lot of that is because that Air Zoom unit was flat. It just had no structure to it. It just kind of went all over the place. And that is something that the team changed quite drastically with the Pegasus Premium. But this is where the learnings from the Vaporfly and the Zoom All Out come together. Really, that bag of Air Zoom units that an engineer had and a question that they were trying to answer. Could they take this curve, as you see here in the carbon fiber plate or the fly plate from the Vaporfly, could they put that curve into an Air Zoom unit? And if they did, what would that actually feel like? Now, Nike had been trying to curve the Air unit or sculpt the Air unit for some time, but they could never get the durability in it that they really needed. But through this cycle, that all started with that bag of Air Zoom units and a heat gun and a mold that was proof of concept that they could mold a curve into the Air Zoom units, we got something quite special with the Pegasus Premium. But why is that curve so important for the Air Zoom unit? Well, it's really two things. The first is it follows the contours of the foot, so it's a much more natural feel underfoot. It doesn't feel like you're just stepping on this platform. It feels like something that's actually shaped like your foot and will move with your foot very naturally. But also, as we've seen in the Vaporfly, every time you impact the ground in the Vaporfly, that curved fly plate is actually flattening out and then springing back, flattening out, springing back, flattening out, springing back. And that same effect is actually now happening with the Air Zoom unit in the Pegasus Premium. And it's that curve that you can see here in the Air Zoom unit that is really the magic of this shoe. Not only does it follow the contours of the foot, so it makes this shoe feel much more natural underfoot running or walking than the Zoom All Out ever did, but also when you compress this shoe, this Air Zoom unit will flatten out and offer some bounce back, some of that Vaporfly-like spring out of the foot strike. Combine that with the resilience or the energy return of the Zoom X foam and the engineered resilience of the actual Air Zoom unit, which is something that Nike can really engineer and fine-tune as far as the energy return they want the Air Zoom unit to actually have. And you get a very, very boing ride, a very responsive and very propulsive ride underfoot. And that responsiveness coming from the Zoom X foam, the Air Zoom unit, and this curve now puts this shoe at the top of the responsive cushioning silo for the Nike training line, for the Pegasus line. And if we look at all three of the pegs together, you can see the full responsive cushioning tier for Nike now, and you can see how there's a progression here. Starting at the Peg 41, that's that very neutral cushioned ride. The Peg Plus becomes a much more resilient ride, really leveraging just Zoom X foam as the engine of that shoe, where the Pegasus Premium becomes something even more, leveraging not only Zoom X, but also the Air Zoom unit and the curve, the learnings from Nike Super Shoes, all in one shoe, bringing you a very different yet very responsive ride. And it's that responsive ride that has really made this shoe stand out for me. Now, this is not the type of shoe that I typically spend a lot of time in. I typically prefer simpler shoes that are lower stack, that have more ground feel, not this kind of shoe that has just all of the tech in it. But from the first run I did in this shoe, I was kind of blown away. I have never run in a shoe that's quite like this. We have never really felt an Air Zoom unit that's like this. If you run a lot in the Alphafly 3, you know that sort of boing effect that I'm talking about. But that's two separate AirPods that are on different sides of the shoe that are not connected. This shoe has one Air Zoom unit, So when you impact the ground as a 4-foot striker who supinates, I'm landing like this, I can feel the ZoomX foam and the Air Zoom unit compress and cushion my foot, but I can also feel the medial side of the shoe kind of firm up, tense up. And that's the tensile fibers in this Air Zoom unit. And that kind of pulls the shoe out immediately. It's not kind of this getting lost in all of this cushioning. It's very responsive because I impact, I feel the cushion, I feel the Air Zoom unit kind of flatten out a little bit too, and then all of it just immediately sort of bounces out. And it's extremely responsive. It's not exactly like an Alphafly. It's not exactly like a pure ZoomX shoe like a Vaporfly either. It's something altogether different that, as I said, it's something I have never experienced, and I don't think anyone else is really running a shoe quite like this. And what's impressed me is when I tested heel striking in the shoe, I found it to be actually a lot more stable than you think. Now, I think we've all seen the Instagram reels or stories on YouTube of, people hitting the shoe like this from behind and showing how wobbly it is. But those don't matter because you're never hitting the shoe at this angle. You're hitting more around this sort of angle. And I'm going to say that the width and the structure of the Air Zoom unit actually do a very good job of controlling the foot. The ZoomX foam that's above it absorbs. The ReactX foam, being a denser cushioning system, actually does a good job of stabilizing to move you into the forefoot of the shoe, move you across the curve of this Air Zoom unit. And it feels really nice. As a midfoot striker, if I'm landing just dead flat in this shoe, I'm literally just loading up all of the ZoomX, the entire Air Zoom unit, and it feels even more explosive, I think, as a midfoot striker than it does as a 4-foot striker or a heel striker, because you're just getting all of the cushion of this system and all of the propulsiveness of the Air Zoom unit. And that is really what's so different about this shoe. This full-length Air Zoom unit is, again, it's hard to describe because you've not run in anything like this. It seems like it would be unstable. It seems like when you compress it over here, all the air is going to move back here and it's going to just kind of feel all over the place. And maybe that's what the Zoom All Out felt like, but this curve, I think, controls it. I also think Nike's engineering has really, fine-tuned the tensile fibers in here, and I feel like there's probably zones in here that also help control that, like I described. When I'm striking forefoot on the lateral side, I can almost feel the medial side kind of firm up and like pull my foot over so that I can really roll off the toe in the shoe. It's a really, really interesting and brand new experience in this shoe. Now, there is a big engineering aspect of this midsole that I think is super important for how this shoe rides, but also it makes the usability for me much higher. Can you see it? If you follow this channel, you probably know what I'm about to say. That is, this shoe has a traditional geometry. This shoe is a Pegasus. It has the Pegasus geometry. It doesn't have the giant rocker that you would associate with a shoe with this much stack height, but also this much tech in it. Now, that rocker is typically in a very high stack shoe to help you toe off, to help you get over the height of the foam and make toe off feel more natural. But this shoe somehow manages to maintain a traditional geometry, but still have a very smooth and natural toe off. And again, I think it's that curve that's in here. The curve that's in the forefoot of the shoe and the toe spring in particular that's in the front of the Air Zoom unit with the structuralness of the Air Zoom unit, I think behave a little bit like Saucony's speed roll technology, where you can definitely feel the shoe rolling forward, but it's not a literal falling forward feeling like you get with a big rocker. And that's why I love this traditional geometry. This is still a Pegasus. This is a trainer. I want a more traditional geometry in a trainer because I want to dictate how I want to run. I don't want the shoe just continually making me fall forward. In a tempo trainer or a race shoe, yes, I want that. But in a trainer, I want this flatter, more traditional geometry so I can dictate how I want to run in this shoe. So I've found this shoe very comfortable doing easy plodding, jogging, recovery style running, the slowest of slow running. This shoe has been very, very well mannered for that. But at the same time, as soon as I pick it up and get into half marathon pace, 10K pace, even 5K pace, This shoe now is ready to go. I'm getting all the resilience out of the midsole. I'm getting the roll forward because of this curve, and it just works. But I have the versatility of this beautiful traditional geometry, which is a big deal. Now, I like that traditional geometry, but I do think that's going to take some runners who aren't used to running in a more traditional geometry shoe some time to get used to. Because again, this shoe isn't making you fall forward. It's not forcing you to only just keep toeing off. It allows you to dictate how you want to run. And I think given where modern running shoes are right now, where everything is high stack, heavily rockered, I think a lot of runners maybe aren't used to that. But if you're used to a peg, you're used to that Nike toe-off feel, which if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll link in the description to a video that goes into that in depth. This shoe still maintains all that Nike feel. So you're going to feel like you're in a peg. You're just going to have a more responsive cushioning system underfoot. And it's a really brilliant ride. Now I've put over 50 miles into this shoe, about 56 miles actually, because I just couldn't stop myself from running in. I've enjoyed it that much. I have a lot more testing to do in this shoe. I have a lot more thinking to do about this shoe. I'm going to be doing some versus videos comparing this shoe to kind of some unexpected shoes. There's going to be a lot more coming about this shoe. But this is a very, very good running shoe, and it feels like true innovation. This is Nike at their best. Materials, practical engineering, putting it all together in a performance-driven product. This, again, is the first shoe out of Nike's new innovation super cycle, and if this is just the start, I'm really excited to see where we're actually headed. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing. You'll see more content from me pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.